Good evening, welcome to New Horizons. If you do have a mobile phone, if you would like to put it on silent, please, thanks. Right, massive welcome to Danielle and Verite with Fearless, Free and Politically Incorrect. Danielle asks certain questions of authority figures, certain celebrities, social services and others who may be operating, who may be operating outside their job descriptions, shall we say. She asked these in a unique way, fine with some, not with others. Capable of making a builder blush and well outside the realms of political correctness with its restrictions and unnecessary presence. A modern Marxist experiment. She does this to achieve the exposure of awkward questions she poses to persons, some of whom are paid to look after our interests, apparently. I have refused to censor this in any way. Please welcome Danielle Verite.
Hello. Okay, right, where to start? I have to have my cup of tea with me. It's my little safety net, I suppose. I haven't been doing this whole public, truthy type stuff for a very long time. So I know a few faces here this evening, but there's probably a few of you that haven't seen the videos that I do or the radio show that I do. So if I just give you a brief background as to how that all works. Basically, a few years back, I've always had a real fascination with psychopathy, serial killers, and the like. And the more I researched them, the more I realised that there was a connection. And I was finding connections with some of the most notorious serial killers to government organisations. And some of them are slightly tenuous, but there's a lot of them that you can really get hold of and look at and think, this is great, this is ridiculous. So some of them, some of my favourite serial killers are definitely involved in what I would class as either some kind of MK Ultra program or part of a system that the authorities use to cause mass hysteria and total fear. They do tend to change these boogeymen. Obviously, we get our boogeymen and they change over time. So the serial killer thing is fairly quiet these days. But the connections I found, to name just a few, are Bundy, Nielsen, Dennis Rader, who happens to be my favourite, if you can have a favourite. He is the BTK killer, bind, torture, kill. And it took them years to find him. I think it was 30 odd years. Hindley, Brady, Yorkshire Ripper. These are all killers that I have absolutely, without a doubt, found to be working within the system. And what could be much scarier than a serial killer on the loose in your town who happens to change everybody's behaviour. And I remember a few years back when we had the Suffolk Strangler, and I lived not that far from Sussex at the time. And it was in the days before I really knew anything about the realities of the system, shall we say. And I remember absolutely crapping it, running home from work in fear before they caught this guy, not really understanding what was going on. Now I have an understanding of these situations and I get why they do this. When you can change a community's behaviour by terrifying the living daylights out of them, you've got them eating out of your hands. And this is something that you can apply to many aspects of society in the way that they treat us. So I find all of that stuff quite fascinating. And it's even more fascinating in the sense that the psychopaths in charge are the ones who come up with these ideas. And they pretty much run every single thing that goes on, as I'm sure everybody here is fully aware of. Anyway, that got me started, and I would just write the odd thing and while I was researching, and then somebody sent me some information, a video that an interview that Aaron Russo had done about 9/11. And while I was working on my serial killer stuff and I started looking into psychopathy within the establishment, it all just started to come together and became quite obvious. So I am not the kind of person to hide my light under a bushel, shall we say. And on my own personal Facebook, I would write the odd thing about the system and how we were being screwed over. And at that time, I had very mainstream, what I would call very mainstream friends. And I started to notice that my friends started to disappear in droves. I started to think, hang on a minute, there's nothing weird about what I'm saying, this is all completely normal, where are you going? Something, obviously, as time goes on, a little bit of giggling, I'm sure a lot of you have experienced the same kind of thing. Anyway, being me, I thought, bothered, I know it's real, so I'm going to carry on. So I started to make a few more friends that were more like-minded and what have you. And as time went on and I was writing these silly things, and they were all about serious subjects, but I just added a little note of humour to it, because this stuff can be, sometimes you just want to go out and hang yourself. If you get too serious about it can be really quite frightening. And then one day somebody had the genius idea, Danny, why don't you make a YouTube video? It would be really funny. So I thought, I don't know, do I really want that kind of thing? Nobody will watch it, I'll look like a bit of a div. That isn't what happened. I did look like a div to some people, but I uploaded a video and it was basically an open letter to David Cameron. And if you haven't seen it, there is a section in the video where I call him a ham-faced Zionist cuntwaffle. I think, something along those lines. Anyway, it was because you see a tiny little person like me, I came across as all innocent, you know, sort of starting to ask normal questions and what have you. And then I come out with that, and obviously the video picked up really, really quickly. Look, you know, this is quite funny what she's saying. And everyone likes to slag off David Cameron, let's face it. So that kind of, I made a couple more videos and they started to get passed around, and within a few days, I'd developed quite a big following already, and it just escalated. And I've been really lucky that it has turned into something much, much bigger, which means I now get to come to places like this and talk crap to all of you, and hope I can teach you something different, or that you can teach me something different. And hopefully I can make you chuckle along the way. Okay, so what I would like to discuss this evening is various issues that I myself have faced as a parent, somebody that lives within the system. A lot of this has sprung from my own experience, and I'm sure there'll be a few of you here today who have had similar incidences occur. A few years ago, my children, my eldest daughter is in secondary school, and I had a phone call one evening that I missed from her school. The phone call came at, I would say, 5 to 4 in the afternoon. I missed it, I phoned the school back, and I continued to phone them until 10 past 4 with no result. So I just, like any normal parent, thought, no problem, I'll call them first thing in the morning. 9 o'clock, I call the school. In the 15 minutes between them phoning me and me not being able to contact them, they had reported me to social services for neglect of my children. We were then subjected to a 3-month evaluation by social services. A member of staff at the school, who shall remain nameless, basically made up a story that I'd gone away and left my children at home for 4 days on their own. Now, the interesting thing about this, which made the story so utterly ludicrous, and I'm just going to add, I didn't tell them the truth. while the evaluation was taking place. And I'll make that clear as to why as we go on. The social worker comes to my house. Absolutely no idea that the school haven't informed her, as I had when my daughter joined the school, that I'm agoraphobic. And just for anybody who isn't sure what agoraphobia is, it is technically classed as a fear of open spaces. But what it actually does is means you can very rarely leave your house. Now, I suffer with panic disorder, anxiety disorder, and agoraphobia. And when I do something like this, I have medication that allows me to be able to come out and do whatever. So I kept this quiet because I knew that the school knew, and I knew that there must be some ulterior motive behind what they'd done. And instead of shitting my pants, like most people would when social services suddenly appear in their lives for what seems like no reason, your back's already up because you're being accused of something you know you haven't done, and you've got to start wondering why. Now, rather than shit my pants, I decided to go and look into every single aspect of what takes place during a social services assessment. And I found a fantastic website, which off of the top of my head, I'm afraid I haven't got, but I will make it available to anybody that's interested. And I would absolutely advise that anyone who finds themselves in this situation goes and does this, because it saved me. It's a website that a guy set up after having the same similar experience where social services just appeared in their lives for what seemed to be no reason. And it tells you step by step how to get through a social services assessment without being screwed over. And something I found incredibly interesting when I started to read this was, now most of us were raised with good manners. You know, one of the first things you do when someone walks into your house is you offer them a cup of tea. You offer them a drink. It's what we do. We're polite. We're British. That is what we do. I can tell you now that when social services come into your house, if you offer them a drink, they will mark you down on their little form because you're not taking their assessment seriously enough. That is absolutely true. So when you behave like an ordinary, decent, well-mannered human being, they mark you down because you're not taking them seriously enough. Now, that website was fantastic. It said, don't tell them anything that they don't ask you. Because I think you feel, in that position, you feel that the more information you give them, the more innocent you look. The more you let them look into your lives, the more innocent you look. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Never offer up any information that they haven't asked for. Now, it became quite obvious to me that the school hadn't informed social services of my agoraphobia. And given that I'd read that I shouldn't say anything, I didn't say anything. So while this woman's doing these assessments, it takes her 3 months to ask me if she can have access to my medical records. So at that point, I've got a big grin on my face because I know what's coming. 15 years worth of agoraphobia. She came back to my house within about a week of that and said to me, why didn't you tell me you were agoraphobic? Because there's no way you could have been away for 4 days and left your children. She said, and all of this wouldn't have been necessary. And I said to her, because you never asked. It's as simple as that. She dicked around for 3 months. The first thing she should have done was ask for any information that the school had about me. She should have asked me if I had any medical conditions. Nothing. The assessment is based solely on trying to get information out of your children. She also, this is how good this social worker was. I'll tell you what she said to me. She said to me, your child isn't a genius. She's an ordinary child. You know nothing about your daughter. And I said, well, that's really interesting, because at 4 years old, my child was identified by Ofsted as a talented and gifted child. And at 14 years old, which is how old she is now, 2 years on from the social services debacle, my child is sitting her GCSEs a year and a half early because they've run out of work to give her. But a woman who sat in my house for 10 minutes, spelt my name wrong, got my kids' names wrong, told me that I should build a bond, I should allow my alcoholic parent to look after my children on her own, was telling me that I knew nothing about my child. This is state intervention at its very best. And she said to me, "Don't worry, we don't want to take people's kids away from them. It costs us too much money." Really? That's funny. Because last week, I was given a similar talk to this down at the Basis Project in Wiltshire. And I'd mentioned that I believed that there must be some ulterior motive as to why schools appear to be referring so many kids for so many ridiculous incidents. Now, at my daughter's school, I get told regularly of incidents, very regularly, of social services being called. There was one last week because of a 14-year-old girl who lives with her single dad, and they reported her to social services because they said she needs lessons on how to look neat and tidy. They are now paying someone to teach a 14-year-old girl how to be neat and tidy. Now, I can tell you now, as the mother of a 14-year-old girl, if this person knows how to teach a 14-year-old how to be tidy, I want her around my house. And she needs to be earning money somewhere else because she'd make a fortune. And I did say, there has to be ulterior motive. There has to be some kind of reward. Now, what I didn't realise was that right at the back of the audience I had that day was a lady who was a social worker and a former teacher. And she informed me, very reliably, that every child that gets referred by a school to social services is paid £5,000 apiece. £5,000 per child per referral. And then every organisation that is then used, say it's a 10-minute assessment by a psychologist to check the child's state of mind, they get paid a base level of £3,000 per child. And obviously that goes up and up and up. And when you think of how many organisations are involved in removing a child or getting involved in a family, that amount of money is staggering. Schools are basically being used as a racket to traffic children. Now, I thought it was bad enough when I went into a school and told them that I felt it was being run like a Nazi prison camp. When you realise that your child is at that much risk because schools are so desperate to get their hands on money, you have to start wondering why on earth they're shelling out that kind of money between those authorities. I find it astounding and really quite terrifying. We put our kids in schools on a daily basis. They are in the care of that school. We go off, we go to work, we do our daily thing, and you think your children are safe. Well, unfortunately, with the way things stand, it's not that straightforward anymore. Now, as far as the school system goes, we have registration. And I always thought registration was just a simple case of child's registered so that if there's any kind of emergency, fire, whatever, they know who they have and haven't got in that school. Well, it turns out that's just one reason why. The other reason why, and the reason they do it twice a day, is because they also make money out of that. Every child registered at school every single day the school makes money for. So now we're in a situation where if your child doesn't come to school on only one day, it's classed as 2 unauthorised absences. So you can build up a serious amount of unauthorised absences very, very quickly. And when you do that, you end up getting a court summons. It's a civil matter court summons. And obviously a lot of people don't realise that when it's a civil matter, it's completely different than an actual court document. You know, this is basically the kind of thing you get with your council tax. The local authority hires out a room in the court building, in the magistrates building, to scare the living shit out of you, basically, so that you comply and you pay them. And I've actually been helping a family this week who asked for a 10-day absence for their kids, and they didn't get it. So they've been taken to court by the local authority, and they're now being asked for £450 because they dared to take their child to a family wedding. Now, the school can't give any realistic reason why they wouldn't give this child the time off. No attendance issues, no nothing. It clearly states in school booklets that children are allowed 10 days off throughout the year. So there was no real reason for that, other than to make money. The whole thing, none of this is based around teaching our children. This is all based around making money. And where's it going? What are they using it on? Because we're told every single day of the week that the money isn't there to fund schools, the money isn't there to fund services. So where's all of this money going? Care homes are privatised now. I've got somebody that I speak to who's a manager of a care home, and they're all privately owned now. So we're talking about children who are basically a commodity. When social services does manage to get their mitts on them, these kids are passed around from home to home, and the staff in these homes are paid minimum wage. So, say you get a kid that is bloody hard work. He has a terrible upbringing, abuse, violence, any number of awful reasons why a child might end up in a care home. And obviously, you know, this child could grow up with serious issues. And if we've got one of those children that has, they put them into this care home, staff getting paid minimum wage, too afraid to deal with the child because the child has anger issues, the child is bloody hard work to deal with. So the staff think, screw this, I'm not coming to work for minimum wage to have the crap beaten out of me by a 15-year-old kid. So the management will sit down and they'll say, well, none of our staff are coming to work, so we can't run the home effectively. We'll have to speak to higher management. Higher management sit down and say, well, this isn't working out. We're going to have to sell this child on to another home. That's how they do it. £10,000 per child that gets allocated into a different care home. They basically pass these children around like animals, worse than animals. So these children never have a chance to turn their lives around because they know, these kids know they're a commodity. They're fully aware that the home gets paid money for them. So what they do with these kids, rather than try and help these kids rebuild their lives, they don't force them to go to school, they don't teach them anything of value, they don't give them any kind of parental support, anything that a kid needs to grow up with. They give them money. And they send these children off on days out, go-karting and whatever else. And at 15, yeah, that must be fantastic. But the fact is that one day, these kids are going to grow up and they're going to be looking after us. And do we really want that? Privatising care homes. Absolute genius. Absolute genius. If social services come near you or your children, you absolutely have the right to tell them to fuck off. You do. You don't have to let them into your home. They can carry on their assessment as much as they like. The fact is that without any reasonable if they can't find anything of value to take your kids away from you, and they do it, there'll be big trouble at the end of the day. You have to know how to work these people. You have to know how to use the system's tools against them. And that is something, as time's gone on, I've learned how to do more and more and more, which is why I feel the need to go out and do these talks or to make my videos. It is about using their system to fuck them off. Do I think I can beat them? This is thousands of years worth of programming. I see people, even people who are aware and awake, still talking about voting for standard politicians. And it makes me want to punch myself in the head. I mean, it's nice that people have hope, but you've also got to have a little bit of sense about you. And as far as I'm concerned, anyone that is at the forefront of politics hasn't got there through genuine means. They've been corrupted somewhere along the way, because you do not get to be at the top of politics if you are a genuinely good guy. And I will cover some of that a little bit later on. The other interesting things that I have discovered about the school system, obviously as a parent, I've got a child in a primary school as well. Now, they insist on certain things at school, obviously, uniform-wise, everybody has to look exactly the same, no one's allowed to be an individual. The way they now deal with the children, everything has to be so, the structure is so intense that a child cannot even go and take a pee without the teacher telling them, no, you have to wait until such and such a time. And when my girl was a bit younger, we had an incident like this, and she wet herself in front of all of her school friends. And as you can imagine, I was absolutely livid, went to the school and said, my child's not a sheep, she's not a machine. If my child needs to go for a wee, she's going. That's the end of it. It is basically about compliance. It is school, you are not there to learn, you are there to comply. All they do, all a school is for, is to teach your children how to be compliant, nodding slaves when they grow up. And I interact with the system on a daily basis. So I have incidents regularly, and you can only imagine how much my kids' schools hate my guts. I had to go in a few weeks back because my son was terribly upset because his maths teacher had shouted at him because over the most trivial thing, he'd said to her, I'm very sorry I forgot my homework. I have done it, but I left it on the side. I have done it, but I'll bring it in tomorrow. She screams and shouts at my son in front of the rest of the class and explains to him that, no, that's not acceptable because you didn't ask my permission if you could bring it in tomorrow. What do you mean, ask your permission? So the next day, I go in there and I ask to speak to this woman. Won't come anywhere near me. And I said to them, knowing what I know about the school register, knowing that they won't get paid if my child isn't signed in that day, I say to them, okay, well, if she won't come and speak to me, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take my son with me until she has got time to speak to me. So of course they shit their pants. Eventually, this is how it turns out, right? All I want to do is say to this woman, look, my son's quite a sensitive boy. There are certain ways of dealing with certain children, and reacting like that to Sonny just isn't cricket. I would much rather you just pull him aside gently and say, okay, but next time can we do it this way? Not that I would be happy with that, to be honest, because my kid's not a slave or a sheep. And I end up with the head teacher a year coordinator and this teacher all in a room with me and my son on our own. My son's crying his eyes out because he's absolutely petrified that he's in trouble. And they pretty much bully boyed me into this side room, and they're trying to explain to me that they need consistency. We need consistency. We need everybody to comply to make school work, to make it work. And I said, so basically what you're doing is running a Nazi prison camp. The faces on these people dropped to the floor. And I said to her, well, that's basically what this is. If my son doesn't turn up, toe the line, do exactly what he's told to do, using the exact words that you tell him he can use, only going to the toilet when you tell him he can, to me, that's not teaching a child any form of freedom. That's teaching him how to be a compliant robot. Absolutely. That's what you're doing to 8 and 9-year-old children. So she said, well, we're never going to agree on this. I said, no, we're not. I said, but I can tell you now, my son will no longer take part in the homework programme within your school. It's not mandatory, and to be fair, most of what you teach my children, when they come home, I unteach it, because it's a massive load of bollocks. It is a massive load of bollocks. So we now spend a lot of our time at home reteaching. So for instance, my son at the moment, or has just done, a project on Egypt. Now, we had quite good fun with this one. So I say to my son, Sonny, have you learned about the pyramids yet? Yeah? Who built the pyramids? Oh, well, they got slaves and they pulled the logs and they put the bricks up and da-da-da-da-da. And then it pointed up and it could see the stars, and that's where they used to bury their pharaohs. Okay. Sonny, how big were the blocks? Some of them weighed up to 20 tons, Mum. Sonny, how many slaves do you think it would take to carry a 2 to 20 ton block? I don't know. No, Sonny. I don't think anybody would know. Because I think it's pretty much impossible. I said, Sonny, what did they use to get the to get the stones in place? Well, they had tree logs and they tied rope around them and they put the blocks on them and they pulled them along. Okay. Where'd they get the logs from? Dunno. It's the desert. How many trees have you seen in Egypt, in the desert? I haven't seen many. I said to him, Sonny, how did they get the big blocks all the way to the top of the pyramid? And he went, well, they made a ramp and then they rolled them up there. So I said to him, so you got a pyramid that looks like this. You got a load of slaves, probably not that much bigger than me in all fairness in them days. They've got logs that we don't know where they came from. And they've built this ramp. Where'd they get the rubble to build the ramp, Sonny? Dunno. How steep would the ramp have to be, Sonny? Well, to get up there it would have to be like that. So you're telling me that a few slaves who were working through the boiling hot sun in Egypt all day long, weren't looked after very well, obviously, because they're slaves. Not being fed very well, you know. You're telling me they had the strength to get these stones on these logs all the way up that ramp. We don't know where the logs came from. We don't know where they got the rubble to build it. But they still managed to carry them up this high. I said, Sonny, people didn't build the pyramids. Well, not people like us anyway. And I said to him, I don't know who did build them, but it certainly wasn't people like us. So now, When you ask my 9-year-old son who built the pyramids, his simple response is, your mum. Which is probably not that great, but at the end of the day, I would rather him say that than have the official crap story that he's been given from school, because it's just utterly ludicrous. And you find this more and more within the school system. The stories that they're taught, the things they learn, the subjects that are completely avoided in school. They fill our kids' heads with the most useless knowledge you can imagine. Even if it's true, it's completely pointless. And then our kids are sent out into the big bad world to try and survive. How are they supposed to do that? How are they supposed to survive? Your whole life, from the day you're born to the age of 16 or 18, is determined by a few exam papers of bollocks. That's your life. How can anyone see this as sense? It's nothing. It's to teach your kids to be compliant, so when they go out into the world of work, they know how to say, yes sir, 3 bags full sir. That's what you're getting. And yet I see mums at my school every single day going on about how brilliantly well Tarquin and his mates are doing in whatever lesson. And they're so pleased. They are so pleased that they've raised kids that know how to do every single aspect of every single, they can study a project and get every single thing right. They'll spend their weekends making big, diagrams and God knows what else. When my kids come home with stuff like that, I say to them, you want to do it? Nah, me either, it's bullshit. Simple as that. I'm feeding my children this knowledge from a very, very young age. And now when I ask my son, what do you want to be when you grow up? He says, I want to be you. And I say to him, you want to do what I do, or you want to grow up wearing dresses? Just need to check. Just checking. He wants to do what I do. So, just as a prime example of what you're up against with this, was when my ex-husband and my son's dad realised what I was doing with the talks and the videos and everything else. He was absolutely mortified. Lives mainstream as mainstream can get. Big house, flash car, you name it. Mortgages, everything. You totally as straight as a die with stuff like that. I'm so far off the other end of the scale, it's untrue. So he sits my son down. This is absolutely true. He sits my son down and he says, Sonny, I'm very worried about the things that Mummy's teaching you. He said, he went onto his computer and showed my son some rubble, buildings that had been knocked down to rubble. And then he showed my son a picture of someone digging a hole in the ground to bury their poo in. And he says to my son, if Mummy gets her way, then the world will turn into chaos, and this is what will happen. You'll be burying your poo in the ground. I know there are people that don't understand. They're not aware that there's a system in place that's designed to screw us over. But that, as far as I'm concerned, is utterly terrifying. Really quite terrifying. Which leads me quite nicely onto psychopathy and the people in charge of this nightmare that we're all living in. Apart from the school system and social services, as everybody knows, these things all intertwine. They all mesh together. It's this massive, great, big, horrible spider's web of evil. And everything seems to just click into place. They've had this shit down for so many centuries that they can play us like this. Things that are happening to us now, they've organised 50, 60 years ago. They know what they're going to do to us well in advance, because they have to do it slowly. It has to be a slow process. If they try and do it overnight, it's never going to happen, because we still have that much of a rocket up our arse to say, no, we're not taking this. So they have to do it really, really slowly. And it gets to a point where people actually welcome it. People welcome this insidious crap that is being just oozed. I can't think of a better word than oozed into our lives. You know, for years, they put out eating crap food, just smoking, got whatever it is, they throw it at us and throw it at us, and then one day they go, oh no, ooh, this is really bad for you now. Smokers, you're to blame for the NHS having no money. Fat people, you're to blame for the NHS having no money. You're all to blame because you all did it to yourselves. No. You bombarded us with this shit. You told us how great it was. You gave us televisions, told us it was the best thing in the universe, and then you pummeled us with the crap that we're now all suffering from. Because in those days we trusted you. Now, the only reason we listen to you is because we're completely brainwashed, and we're so busy working all the hours God sends that we can't think about anything else, because we're out there working 12-hour days to pay for the roofs over our heads that we're never in. My house costs such and such. How many hours are you in it? You were done. I'm telling you, you were done. It's ludicrous. The whole thing is an absolute ludicrous sham. And we have these things thrown at us all the time. This is good for you now. This is good for you. And I've got to a stage now where when they tell me something's good for me, I immediately go, I don't think so. Energy saving light bulbs. And this is something I've needed to talk about for a while, because I have my own experience, which has actually turned out to be incredibly grim with energy saving light bulbs in my house. I thought I was being a decent human. I'm a little bit green. I've got my energy saving light bulbs. I can tell you now that I've ended up with heavy metal toxicity. And some of the symptoms that come along with that are so utterly grim that I don't think I can actually say it out loud in this room. But I can tell you, if you've never seen your own blood separate into plasma and cells, get yourself a bit of mercury poisoning, because you'll watch it happen before your very eyes. Because that's what happens to my blood. It runs out clear as clear plasma. They're insidious. I have ended up with extreme vertigo, which is completely uncontrollable, fertility problems, which are an absolute nightmare. I was thrown into early menopause at the age of 32 or 33 because of having energy-saving light bulbs and amalgam fillings in my mouth. Now, they're banning old-fashioned, ordinary household light bulbs soon. You're only allowed to buy energy-saving light bulbs. I wonder why. Because they're trying to poison you all in your homes. I got rid of every single one of them. I have very luckily been sent a lot of stuff by people who are trying to balance out the toxicity so that I can get back to a normal range. But I would have bouts of vertigo for 3 or 4 days where I physically couldn't even move my eyes from side to side because it was that horrific. It's like being the drunkest you could ever be without actually being drunk. It's horrendous. It completely debilitates you. God only knows what it's doing to the rest of you. It really is worth getting rid of these things. And if you can get rid of your amalgam fillings, then do. There are a lot of other things that give us heavy metal toxicity, but you will never get a GP to tell you, I think that's what you might have. They're never going to say it. You have to tell them to test you for it. And then you're going to know what you've got, and you can then move on from there and either get your own treatment or what have you. And there are some really great people out there that do have some really good treatments for it. leading on from that is the bottled water thing. And one of my friends, I've known for a while that the bottled water thing isn't a particularly good idea. Obviously much better than tap water, but there is one problem with this. Our bottled water is put into plastic bottles. All of the nasty chemicals are still floating around that water. You're just being poisoned by something different this time. They're just shaking it up. We'll poison them with lead out of tap water and fluoride and 7 other people's piss, and God knows what they've been taking. We're all infertile because all of the women's mini pills and God knows what else are floating around, their piss that we're now drinking. So we'll give them bottled water, make them think, yeah, they're doing the right thing, they're drinking clean water, but we'll put it in plastic bottles so we can still get the fuckers. And it was really interesting because the other day I did rob this. Actually, I'm going to admit I robbed this bit. I didn't make this up, but it is quite clever. If you read Evian backwards, what does it say? Naive. There you go. In plain sight, my friends, in plain sight. And then you've got old Mr. Nestle, who wants to privatise water. Now I can tell you now, you might think I'm a bad person, I think it makes me great. I don't pay bills. I don't pay a water bill, and I haven't paid one for 9 years. As far as I'm concerned, water is free. You've made it illegal for me to catch my own rainwater and distill it and drink it.
Yeah, that's really bad.
Yeah. Why the fuck should I pay you all that money to drink 7 other people's piss? You having a laugh? You've got to be kidding me. There's no way. So no, I don't pay for water. And even if Nestle privatise it, what are they going to do? Give it to us in bottles?
You could say 7 other people have already paid for it.
Do you know what? I'm having that as well. But there you go. So when you think of how many chemicals you must have floating around your system, and you then have to pay for the pleasure, well, I can tell you now, it's something I'm not going to do. Absolutely not going to pay to have other people's junk going through my system. So, how do we tackle this? I'm screwed now. I can't drink bottled water. I don't want to drink tap water. What am I going to do? These are the things that need to be looked at. These are the areas that I see so many people buying bottled water and thinking, yeah, I'm doing a much better thing. God only knows what toxins you're getting out of that as well. So if they don't get you with heavy metal, they're getting you with plastic and all the nasty chemical fumes and God knows what else that comes from that. I mean, it's non-biodegradable. That's got to tell you something, you know. Probably, I don't know if it'll live as long as the Queen, survive as long as her, but I don't think anything's lived as long as that old bat, in all fairness. Sorry if there's any royalists in tonight, but she's going to get a bit of a hammering later as well. Oh dear. Right. So, the last thing I want to mention before we all take a break and everyone can have 5 minutes of not listening to me, is I saw something fascinating on telly the other day, and it's all part of the agenda and screwing our kids up, and you know, like I said, it all leads into one thing and another. So the other day someone posted on the dreaded Facebook, here are the candidates for Mr. Nottingham 2015. Bloody hell, do I wish I had a picture to show you all this now, right? But in the break, if you have got a smartphone on you, tap it in and have a look. Genius. 4 fellas, early 20s, late teens, up for Mr. Nottingham. If they were men, in the standard context of men, I'm a monkey's uncle. It was incredible. And I did sit there and I thought to myself, you know, they're dressing a bit girly, it's all a bit very, very feminine. Hair in a ponytail, shorts on, you know, perfectly plucked eyebrows, fake tan, manicures, the lot, all of them. And I did think to myself, hang on a minute, Am I being a bit harsh? Am I jumping the gun and calling out sort of, you know, transhumanist agenda, androgyny? You know, are they trying to blend the sexes together that much? And I thought Spandau Ballet used to do it donkeys years ago, and you know, they were all flamboyant and whatever else. And then I thought about the 50s and the 60s. When men dressed like men, there was a huge distinction between men and women. Now, they think they're individual, right? Every young man you see has the exact same Lego haircut or Ken doll haircut. They've got the swished side bit. It is so rock hard, you could probably snap it, and the sides are shaved. But they all look individual. None of them look alike. And I know there's trends. I know that, you know, as the years have gone on, we've all seen it happen over the years, and there's some that shouldn't ever come back, particularly the shell suit, and I think there are many more reasons why that should never come back again now, unless you're wearing it on Halloween with a pair of specs and a cigar. Yeah, I mean, it really was ludicrous. And I'm sure there's a lot more normal-looking fellas around Nottingham who would have made just as wonderful contestants as these four. It honestly astounded me. And if you want to see this transhumanist stuff in action, it's all you have to do is have a look. And they like making stupid people famous. Stupid people are now the coolest thing ever. Now, there's a thing called a Joey Essex, right? Now, I'm not up on all this stuff, and neither's my daughter because she's a complete geek. And I look at these things and I think, have you ever come across someone in your life, right, that you've looked at and genuinely, in your heart of heart, have thought, you're so stupid, I don't know how you can actually get up, move your arms and legs, and dress yourself. It is like, it's like a blank, it's like having a brand new human being that you've done nothing with yet. I mean, in some ways, that's quite positive, because you could mould these people into anything you want. Why do they want stupid, compliant, thick people? Because they need them to do basic jobs when the shit hits the fan. I can't see why you would want to make the population stupid other than to have ultimate control over them. So now they're making it cool to be thick. Don't be a doctor. Don't study law. Don't do anything that you'd need to use your brain with. No, just look pretty. That's what you need to do. Don't need a brain. Don't go to uni. Why? Because they need to control everybody in every aspect. That's what it's about. And parents can't see this. Up and down the land, parents cannot see what is happening to their children. I speak to parents about this stuff, and they roll their eyes, and they're walking away going, that nutty bitch again. They're not interested. Even when you tell them the truth, they couldn't care less. It's too much even for their brains to take on. My brain is too tired. I want to go home and watch Holby City. You know? And it all leads on to how our families are being separated, how we're all being pulled apart as families. And that is something that I will carry on with in the next part. Okay. I did say I was going to start off somewhere when I came back, and being a bit of a wally and having gone out for a couple of cigarettes, now I can't remember. But I do have something really important to talk about, and that is vaccines. And it is still connected to the school system, because although we are given another lie, I may as well just say it as it is, it's a lie. We're told we have freedom of choice with regards to vaccinations with our children. And again, it's something I've experienced on a personal note, and I know other parents who've come to me and said the same thing. You have the freedom of choice as to whether or not you vaccinate your children. On a personal note, I find it incredibly bizarre that you would in any way allow poisons that you don't really know anything about to be pumped into your kids under the guise that it's for their own good. Now, because I like to ask questions, I decided that I would have a look when my daughter was offered the HPV vaccine last year. And after looking into it and seeing all of the just horrific crap they put into these vaccines, I decided that no, absolutely not, would she be having this vaccine. Now at her age, even though the school don't like it, they won't push it. Although I did get a phone call from my local health authority asking my reasons as to why I turned the vaccine down. And I just said to the community nurse, oh, I've researched it, I've had a look what's in it, it's full of poison and I don't want that in my child's system, so no thank you very much. And she said, is there any way I can change your mind? No, absolutely not. Okay, job done. When your kids are very, very small, obviously they go through vaccines on a regular basis. And I think it's something like, by the age of 4 or 5, they've had 32 separate poisons put into their bodies under the guise of health and keeping our children safe from a number of diseases. And it does make you wonder how humanity survived for so many thousands of years before they created vaccines. Because realistically, there would have been nobody left. But, no, very odd that you wouldn't question lying, thieving, fraudster, in some cases paedophiles, possibly murderers, when they're telling you, yeah, vaccinate your kids. Why wouldn't you trust a bunch of fraudsters? If you went into a prison that was full of fraudsters, con men, liars, cheaters, child abusers, and they gave you a needle with a concoction in it and said, here, jab this in your kid's arm, it will rescue them from this horrendous disease. You'd go, stroll on fella. You'd be having none of it. None of it. So why do you trust these people who have shafted us over and over again, who've escaped any number of crime they've committed, yet you see people line their kids up like guinea pigs to have vaccines shoved into their arms. Now, when my children were very small, because obviously my eldest is 15 now, back in those days I was quite young, didn't really know much of much. So of course I had my daughter vaccinated. Now she's older, if I could go back in time, not a chance in hell. Absolutely not a chance in hell. I firmly believe that my daughter has Asperger's to a degree. She was a completely normal child until she reached around 4 years old, and I was told it's time for her booster jabs so that she can attend primary school. Now, this is where the illusion of choice comes in. Because if you choose not to vaccinate your child pre-school, the majority of schools will not allow your child to attend that school. So then you've got a dilemma. Because there are a lot of parents that don't like the idea of vaccines, but they're still unaware of what the school system is. So then they find that their hands are tied. What do I do? My child can't go to school if I do not have them vaccinated. What kind of choice is that? Many people are forced into it for that reason. The HPV, if you haven't got a daughter or haven't looked up what it is to protect against the human papillomavirus, which is what we are told causes cervical cancer. The links are tenuous, to say the least. Now, I did this as a very informed parent, as somebody who's actually had surgery myself due to the changes in the cells of my cervix that were I was told were quite serious. And they kept dragging me back there over and over and over again, giving me colposcopies, which is a particularly unpleasant procedure where they basically cut portions away and have it sent off to be tested. And you're never told where these sections of your bodily parts end up. It'd be quite interesting to know. But over and over again, over the course of 2 or 3 years, they kept sending me. And then eventually I thought, hang on a minute. Every time you're fobbing me off, you're telling me, oh, we don't know which course of action to take next, so we'll just cut a bit more out of you in 6 months. And eventually I thought, I'm not happy about this. It's not a particularly comfortable thing to have done. And it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So I went somewhere completely separate, and I had all of the relevant tests done. And guess what? There was absolutely nothing wrong with me. They were cutting bits out of me for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Yeah. I've never found out where those bits were going. But what I can tell you is that my family bloodline is Rh negative. I come from an old elite family bloodline. My great-grandfather was a very, very famous banker in France. I am albino. I have genetic albinism. So does my twin sister and my older sister. We have had more procedures between the 3 of us than I think the entire children's wing on Great Ormond Street has developed. They've cut both of my sister's eyes out and put them back in. All kinds of bizarre procedures. There is something very important to do with harvesting Rh negative patients. And I know a few people that are researching into this at the moment. And when you see all of the scandals that you've seen in the hospitals where they've got organs of children and whatever else that they've kept, it's a seriously big problem, and it's something that I would like to learn a hell of a lot more about. But the fact is that I went through all of this, and as a parent, as a woman who went through all of this, I chose not to have my daughter vaccinated. They use scare tactics. It's always a scare tactic. If you don't have this vaccine, you will die a horrible death of one thing or another. And what's really interesting is the MMR, they followed the same pattern here, because MMR stands for mumps, measles and rubella. They give boys the MMR. Boys can't get rubella. Now they've introduced the HPV vaccine for boys, just to be doubly sure. I think I can state quite clearly that my boy won't be having that. It seems utterly ridiculous. There's absolutely no way it could affect a man in any way, shape or form. It's just another way of getting more and more poison into children as far as I'm concerned. What the motives are behind it, I suppose there could be any number of reasons why they want to keep on shoving God only knows what into us. Like genetically modified food, it is actually changing people's DNA, physically changing people's DNA. And all I can assume is that the concoctions of God only knows what that goes into us, maybe it's a reason why. There are people who are probably far more knowledgeable than I am about this. Which takes me on to, actually takes us over to Australia. And that lovely politician, Tony Abbott. Don't know if you've seen, but recently they have decided that if you are on state benefit and your children are not vaccinated, you will lose your support. And I watched, he has a Facebook page. I watched thousands in their droves on that page treat this man like he was a hero. An absolute hero. You're saving the world, Tony. Ooh. What they didn't ask, so I decided to ask, along with a few other people, was why, Tony Abbott, if this is so important and you're going to basically starve these kids to death, they'll be vaccinated so they won't die of that shit, but they'll die of starvation. Why aren't your kids vaccinated, Tony Abbott? Do you know something that we don't? Very interesting, to say the least. I think probably the best way to go with this is for me to do what I'm probably quite well known for, which is call some politicians some horrible names. Now, obviously, a lot of you have, it turns out, seen my YouTube videos, and I thought it only right that at this time of year, being baby hugging season, it might be appropriate to share a few thoughts on what I think of the upcoming election. Now, having spoken to a few people in the break just there, I'm really, really, really sorry in advance for what I'm about to say, because I know some of you aren't going to like it. And if you hate me afterwards, I'm really sorry. Okay, of course, right, baby hugging season. Comes but once every 4 years. But firstly, I think the most relevant thing I'd like to say is this week we are expecting the birth of the royal baby. I don't see many royalists in here tonight. Now, I was in Paddington last weekend and I saw a couple with a TV crew with a camera, and they were stopping people and asking them what they thought of the impending royal birth and were they excited. Now, I got a little bit excited about this because I thought, ooh, they might stop me. They must have felt something in the air because they ran. They literally, I turned around and they'd gone. I was so gutted because I would have obviously said what I wanted to say, which unfortunately I didn't get a chance to do. But obviously I do have a slight issue with the royal baby. Not the baby itself, it's a baby. Baby can't help being born. It doesn't choose who it's born to. Or does it? To be quite honest, the way I look at it, right, is the royal family are the biggest bunch of benefits scrounging goat-legged fuckers on the face of the earth.
I'm the chairman.
That they are. But they hide that pretty well, don't they? Windsor! Our name is Windsor! Yeah, whatever. So, given that we're all going to be funding the life of a silver-spooned baby, it won't really be important because it's not the next king, which, that's a bit shit really, isn't it? I mean, talk about having second child syndrome. That's going to be a bit shit. Growing up, right, knowing, sod off you, go and play strip poker in Vegas, we don't give a shit about you. Go and join the army for a little while so people can go, yay, because really you don't matter. We only care about George. As far as I'm concerned, I won't be watching any of the coverage. I couldn't give a shit whether it's a boy or a girl, and I don't care what they call it. my only response to anybody, which I know I will still see on Facebook, because sometimes it does amaze me that even people who are so aware of things, when that baby was born the other year, people were still getting excited, and I just thought, oh my God. I've got a simple, very brief, to the point response, which will be seen on my Facebook by the time this baby is born. And it will simply say, get your goat-hoofed spawn out of my visage. I do not want to know. I genuinely do not want to know. But it does carry me on to the theme of baby huggers. Obviously, it's pantomime season. But this is a special pantomime because we only get it once every 4 years. Because we're that lucky that we live in a democracy and we get to choose. Isn't that great? We actually get to choose who tells us that we can't do anything with our lives. We get to choose who tells us how much money they're going to screw out of us. It's fabulous. I can't wait. Personally, I'm incredibly excited about this moment. Now, it's always interesting to watch these clowns over election time, pretending to be real human beings. It's quite amusing, you've got to admit. If you look at this as the pantomime it is, rather than getting angry about it, just watch them. It's actually quite good entertainment. Baby hugging. It's got to be the only time ever that a politician can pick up and hold a baby without abusing it or eating it. There must be maternity units, convalescence homes, paediatric wards, palliative care units, homeless shelters, any number of service that deals with the vulnerable in the community, absolutely squeaking in their pants. Because you know full well that one of those bastards is going to turn up with his mates, with his camera, like this. Who wants to talk to him? They made the mistake of knocking on my door the other day. Will you be voting Nick Dubois? Yeah, so I would be pretty worried if I was in a maternity unit right now, and I would be hanging on to my baby for dear life. Anyway, I think we should focus on what it is that they do during the pantomime. They love when they're not baby hugging and pretending to be real people. They love a bit of personal devastation. How can we make ourselves look like real human beings? I know, we'll use a terrible event. We'll talk about our personal life. That will make us look real. We'll play on their emotions because people have got emotions. Right, how do we do that? In recent weeks, David Cameron and his missus have come out and talked about the devastation and loss of their child, who quite interestingly was their firstborn son, or firstborn child. Now, there is a lot of talk and a lot of theory out there that the elites often practice the sacrifice of their firstborn child. It's not something I know very much about, and it's not something I'm going to say, yes, that absolutely happens. There are some that I've looked at and thought, oh, that's a bit close to the mark. Aside from that, they sat there and they basically hoard out the memory of their dead son to gain emotional votes from human beings who are capable of emotions. on a scale of 1 to 10 of ultimate deplorable scumbaggery, that's an easy 10, without a doubt. You don't talk about the death of your son the rest of the time. You wait until an election. What kind of monster would use their child to behave in that way? Psychopathic monster. Exactly right. Only a psychopath would use that in the way that he has used it, timed perfectly for an election. If members of the public who get sucked in by psychopaths, which sadly a lot of people do, would possibly see this as a genuine outpouring of emotion. Now, obviously, again, being me, liking to have a look and ask questions, what I found really interesting about the fact that they talked about the NHS care that their son received and how wonderful it was, and without it they wouldn't have coped. What's really interesting is that that ham-faced tosser has removed that care for everybody else in their situation. Now, if your child had died in the way that their child did, and if you'd have used the services and were very, very happy with them and couldn't have coped without them, as a normal, empathic human being, how could you take away the opportunity for other people to have that same level of care? No empathic, ordinary, decent human being would ever want someone to suffer in the way that they and their family suffered. You wouldn't take that care away, but he has. And he's also sold off a third of the NHS to Richard Branson. There you go. That's something to think about if you do want to vote Conservative. Because I can tell you now, not one single one of these bastards is what is classed as a normal human being. You don't get to the top of politics by being a decent, jolly old chap. You don't. You will find quite very easily, like in the videos I've done, asking questions to certain people, the links you can find to these people, the other jobs they have, the other things they do, the things they're involved in, the executive chairs they sit on, it is all to line their own pockets, and they are basically puppets who have their strings pulled by the corporate elite, i.e. bankers. Now, if I wanted to watch puppets, I would probably watch The Muppet Show, because they're a lot funnier. And they don't want to take any money off of me. Yes, it's a shame. Could you imagine having something like Spitting Image these days? Now, as you can, as expected, all of these other goons are in on this pantomime and are playing the compassionate we're real people card as well. But the masks do slip now and again. And there was an incident the other week where poor old Ed Miliband, or Ed Millipede, as I like to call him, wasn't very impressed with Nicola Sturgeon. So he tried the telltale approach. And watching him have a go at Nicola Sturgeon, it was there, it was there, it was there. It was a bit like being back in the playground and watching my kids. No, mummy, it was her, she did it. And I would suggest that old Millipede invest in some long trousers and some kind of nasal surgery, which sorry, I know it sounds a bit cruel, but I struggle with that. So basically, because they know he's a nasally weaselly twat, what they've decided to do what they've decided to do, right, in Labour headquarters was they had a brainstorming session. Now, I'm guessing during this brainstorming session that someone had taken a bit of booze with them. And I think they were all quite intoxicated because they, and I shit ye not, my friends, honestly, they have decided that they are going to use Ed Miliband's good looks to get him into number 10. I promise you this, right, this is what I read the other day. So, I can only imagine how many fuzzy ducks were down that night when someone came up with this idea. He's a good-looking bastard. We'll get him in on that. So on polling day, you're going to have a load of women who clearly find him remarkably handsome, ditching their polling cards and chucking their knickers into the ballot box with "We love you, Ed" written on them. It just astounds me that this is what they're doing. But something very interesting about Ed is that obviously the Labour Party has always been known for being a bit fairer on the little man, you know, and trying to, well, outwardly appearing they're supposed to help everybody and be a bit fairer, and the rich people, no, you've had your fair deal for a while, we're going to help out the poorer people for a little while. So I find it quite odd in that case that Ed Miliband has carried on with this debacle of lowering the deficit. Not so red now, are you, Ed? Because we all know that the deficit is a big pile of shite. That's completely made up. Completely made up. Where does that come from? Oh shit, we're in all this trouble and you lot need to give us your cold hard cash. So, regardless of who gets in, it doesn't really matter because, like I said, they are just puppets on strings. And whoever is in next, this will have been organised a very, very, very long time ago at one of the Bilderberg conventions, no doubt. It gets worse. It does get worse, my friends. And I'll tell you how.
The Steinbank's phrase that the grandest plans of mice and men come to nothing.
You could be worse than Cameron, and you could be worse than Miliband. You could be unfortunate enough to be Nick Clegg, the butt monkey of election 2015. And the reason I say that is, let's face it, Nick Clegg will ditch any moral, policy, promise, or good deed because he's so busy ramming his head up the new Prime Minister's arse. He'll be needing a hard hat, and I would suggest that he might want to send in a canary first. He's basically going to agree with anything that's said, tell any lie that needs to be told to get in there, and join anybody just so he can stay there. And you've got to wonder if that's a bit worse, because not only are you a politician, you're the biggest loser. You're the biggest butt monkey. That's pretty shameful and pretty low, isn't it? What's your career? I'm a butt monkey. I think he pissed off a hell of a lot of students when he promised that he would not screw them over with university fees. Don't think he did a very good job. He's also pissed off the disabled quite a lot. I think he's going to have trouble. So no, he's not going to get in on his own basis. He will get in via the arsehole of the next Prime Minister, I should think. It gets worse. If you couldn't think it would get any worse, it does. My next vile little contender is Nigel Farage. Now, I took a little bit of a battering when I made a video about Nigel Farage. And look, at the end of the day, I treat everybody equally. If you're an arsehole, I'm going to call you an arsehole. I'm not going to pretend. And Nigel Farage is an arsehole. I did find something particularly amusing about Nigel Farage though, which kept me going for quite a while. And somebody, I think it was on the BuzzFeed website actually, I'll have to dig it out again because it really was funny. Somebody has actually made a hit piece on Farage, and it is called 23 Things That Look Like Nigel Farage. Now I've got to say, I found this incredibly amusing, because I could be a bit childish like that. It was very, very funny. And there were he'd been compared to a couple of the Muppets. One of them was exceptional because it had like this big loud thing going on. But being compared to a knot in a tree was particularly good, a Ford Escort, and my favourite, a Weimaraner. Now they always managed to catch Farage doing one of his faces. So it was very, very funny, and it was far more entertaining than anything they've got in one of their party manifestos, I've got to admit. I did like it. See, I understand there are a lot of people that are very anti-Europe, and I totally agree with that. Now the trouble is whenever there's huge swathes of people who are anti-something for a very good reason, they throw something at us by way of an answer, by way of appeasing the public. So what do we get? We get UKIP. Now, quite often on the news, you see another UKIP politician having made a complete bumbling twerp out of themselves, saying the most inappropriate thing at the most, to me, appropriate time. And the trouble is with bumbling twerps is they tend to move in packs, growing in number, like gremlins. I wouldn't recommend spilling water anywhere near a UKIP supporter if I were you. And if you happen to hail from another country, you're pretty much well and truly bollocksed when it comes to Farage. And he used to be a corporate banker. I wonder what that agenda is. And just when you don't think you could possibly facepalm anymore, along comes Nicola Sturgeon, the wee Jimmy Cranky of politics. If you haven't seen the comparison picture, I really recommend that you do, because it is outstanding. It's uncanny, honestly, it's uncanny. She's hugged more babies in the last 2 weeks than Angelina Jolie on an adoption recce to the third world. She really has. She also actually reminds me quite a lot of Alid Jones in a frock, bizarrely enough. Anyway. Angelina Jolie's been made a dame. She's now got a royal title. And how has she gained this? By selling out to Big Pharma, cutting off parts of her body to her own detriment, to go around the world and tell women they should cut off their body parts just in case they contract cancer. Now, politicians are wankers, but that's a sellout on a whole other level. She's had her breasts removed. She's had a full hysterectomy. A woman of her age, with no cancer, no cancer, no sign of it, a preemptive measure. And the swathes of support and sympathy that this woman has had across the globe, you see it when you're on social networks. It takes a lot to shut me up, but that had my chin on the floor. And she's now indoctrinated by the royals. Woohoo! Anyway, back onto Nicola Sturgeon. I have a slight issue with this. There was recently a murder up in Glasgow. Now, it was in an unusual part of Glasgow, and it was an unusual kind of crime for that particular area. My best friend lives in this particular area. It's the West End of Glasgow, which is actually quite a nice, decent part of Glasgow. And a lot of the murders that take place up in Glasgow tend to be local gang-related crimes where there's a hell of a lot of poverty, or drug-related murders, that kind of thing. So this was quite an unusual murder of a young woman. She was a nurse, and she disappeared with this guy out of a nightclub, and he was a foreign national, and he murdered her and dismembered her. The guy they believe responsible has been apprehended. Now, after speaking to my friend about this and her making it quite clear that this was a very, very unusual kind of case for this particular part of Glasgow, it did get me wondering that this, me being not that trusting of the system, and I do feel that there are times where there are incidents at particular times to cause the public to change opinions and feelings about certain things. Now, the SNP were doing really badly up in Scotland. Jimmy Cranky has made a complete arsehole of herself, and they needed something. How do you claw back an election? How do you do it? We've now got a crime committed by a foreign national, a director of his own company at the age of 21. He's a foreign national from the European Union. He dismembered the body of a young nurse. Now, I might just be being paranoid, but things started to add up a bit, and it is only a theory, but given how much I research into murder and psychopathy and false flag events and various ways the system works, I couldn't help but feel that this murder would be a fantastic platform for the SNP to gain a sudden, huge turnaround amount of votes. I could be completely wrong, but that's where it had me headed. Personally, I won't vote. I never have, and I never will. There are people that say that no vote is a wasted vote, and if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. Well, that's not actually how I see it, because I know full well that whatever policies are coming, whatever they're going to do, whatever evil plans they have left for us in the next 4 years, have already been decided, already worked out, ready to go, because they've already chosen who the next Prime Minister is going to be. The way I look at it is, if you vote, you have no right to complain. You put them there. You asked them to be there. You then have to take whatever they throw at you, because you gave them their job. If you don't vote, you have every single right to bitch, whinge, moan, whine, kick, scream and create because you didn't ask for this. Because it's a sham. The whole thing's a sham. So no, I won't be voting. I have no interest in who's in there. And on the 7th of May, I believe, is it the 7th of May this year, election day, I will be watching The Muppet Show.
If anyone's got any questions for Danielle, stick your hand up.
Joanne? What do I think about the Green Party? To be quite honest, I think they're a sack of shit as well. Sorry, I know it's a bit blunt, but I can't help but not be blunt about it. Look, any political party that has got any kind of recognition within the system, absolutely not. I mean, there are people that have tried to push the Green Party, and it's not. I do love the fact that people are hopeful enough that there's an alternative. I love that people have still got spirit and hope and whatever. I just think it's a bit misdirected. And I did see some of the debate where the lady from the Green Party was saying about unfair banking and whatever else, but none of them will ever implement the stuff they say beforehand. It's just, I have just reached a very cynical point with politics. I just do not see its value in our society at all. So.
Every MP that enters the House of Commons has to recite a parliamentary oath, which shows an allegiance to
the Queen,
her heirs and successors.
So,
it's not about the people.
yeah. So they've got their hands are tied.
Do you or have you had any ideas about what you would consider a better future for the governance of this country?
Do you know, I'm glad you asked that question, and it's a really interesting one, because we're all looking for answers. We're all looking for a fix. And I've thought about this over and over again. And in my peaceful little hippie mind, I think, how nice would it be to just organise a group of people who lay out a great bunch of stuff. Let's get rid of all the horrible crap. Stop with the weapons, stop with the army, stop with all this stuff. Everybody can just live nicely. We can share out the wealth. Everybody will have enough food, blah, 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 blah. Our children will be raised properly. It takes a community to raise a child.
That's communism, which doesn't work.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I'm saying, in my happy little head, lovely. The fact is that that's not going to work. Whatever happens, there's always going to be someone who wants to corrupt it, which is why politics just doesn't work. Where we go from there, I genuinely cannot tell you. I don't have the answers. All I know...
700 laws passed on everything from Europe. So how do we get out of that?
Sorry?
We've got dictatorship from Europe, but every year we get 700 laws put on this country from the European Union. There's a few gremlins over here. How do we stop that if we don't vote?
Get out. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, this is another illusion. We're led to believe that if we vote to get out of Europe, then everything will be okay. The bankers control the system. They control when the system crashes. No matter what we do, whether we're in or out of Europe, sorry to use bad language, they're going to fuck us over. They used Cyprus as a beta test. They shut down people's bank accounts and they took all of their money overnight. Now, whether you are in or out of Europe, if the bankers choose to do that, they're going to do it. We are not safe if we're out of Europe. I don't agree with being controlled by Europe at all. Absolutely not. but getting out of it isn't going to save us. It's not a quick fix answer, and this is where the problem lies. People look at... No, it doesn't work. No, but that's what I'm saying. It doesn't work. This is the whole point. Things do need to be localised. They absolutely do. You know, you no longer see children playing outside. If I saw a child my son's age playing outside with his friends, I would think, oh, what terrible parents. Years back, we were all allowed to do that. It's living in, the whole living in fear thing, but I honestly, I can assure you, you can vote UKIP to get us out of Europe, you can do whatever. The bankers have still got us by the balls. They're not interested, they don't care. They don't care. If they want to crash our system, like they did in 2008, they're going to do it again. It doesn't matter what laws we're under. They're going to impose more and more laws, regardless of whether we're in or out of Europe. Who's to say that if we leave Europe, we're going to ditch the 700 laws a year that they give us? So, but who's going to ditch those laws? They aren't. Well, how are they going to do it? If it's in Constitution now, it's gone through Europe, but the Queen still has to agree to it. It's not easy. You have to understand the corporate banking system to understand why leaving Europe isn't just going to end the problem. They're going to do. No, but it's not about not sitting back and it's not about sitting back and doing nothing. It's about doing something that isn't going to get us in even more shit. And the things they offer us publicly, the solutions the system offers us are not solutions. They're just veiled attacks.
Do you not consider that this country, as with the individual countries and states in Europe, were managing quite well before they decided to create effectively the EU?
Yeah,
which is a dictatorship.
yeah, absolutely. But the point of it is they want to create a one world system,
Yes.
and they paint it up as this pretty fabulous thing, and it simply isn't.
Which was, did you not consider that, you know, the British Isles functioned quite happily before the European Union was brought?
I can't answer that question because I'm too young.
Yeah, but we remember it.
Quite simply, yeah, but I don't.
Well, you've only got to look at history to see that.
I don't believe history. I would not believe anything written in a history book, I can tell you that. But, like I've said, yeah, the European Union is an absolute disaster for us to be in it because they want a one world system. I don't want to be in Europe, but I'm telling you now that if you're going to rely on a mainstream political organisation to come along and say, we'll get you out of Europe, it will be fabulous, let's go for it. Frying pan into the fire. It's like Red Riding Hood's granny, a wolf with a bonnet on. Where I live? No, I live in the middle of London, so no. Yeah.
In your dialogue, you mentioned common purpose.
Yes.
That organisation. I live in a housing association, not my house. I have to deal with these people. How do I recognise one-to-one if the person is common purpose? What's the signs?
Do you know, that's quite an interesting one. I'm glad you asked that, because what happens with a lot of common purpose, and what they do is they've all been on certain amounts of training. So when they come in, there are certain questions you can ask to determine whether they've been on common purpose training. So if they're trying to implement a new system in the home, whether it be paperwork, whether you're how you have to deal with the people you work with, more health and safety, more more red tape, visualisation, such as nurses at the moment and midwives are being told to be on the lookout for Muslim families. If they look like terrorists, let somebody know that they look like terrorists. This is true. This is what's happening. So you can ask questions, and I do it at my son's school. I ask if they've been on certain training for implementing these new things. And if they say yes, you're dealing with common purpose.
Are they obliged to say yes?
They won't know that you're asking, because it's not called common purpose when they have these training sessions. They won't have a clue what you're getting at. They'll just know that they've been on training sessions. You'll be able to establish if it's common purpose.
Leadership training sometimes.
Yeah. Diversity training, leadership training, all those sorts of things, yeah.
Sorry, I'm equally cynical like you are about politics.
Yeah.
Don't watch a great deal of TV. Just wonder what you thought recently about what happened in Greece with the new guy who swayed of voting, if you like, whether it was rigged, I don't know, who came to power. I just happened to see when he came in the speech he made, it was quite interesting because he actually was targeting the elite and he mentioned the elite. I just wonder what you thought about that, because I just thought it was a specific moment, I thought, in European history where hopefully a political leader is going to challenge the elite. It's all a bit quiet. I just wonder what you thought about that.
Do you know, I'm glad. That's a really great one, because we're in a situation, right, when something like this happens, when it's quite rare that something like this happens, and one of them comes along and they say, do you know what, I'm going to tackle them, I'm going to tackle this, going to tackle that. The cynical, like you said, the cynical side of me thinks, right, mainstream politician, really? I can't...
Was he mainstream though? Because he came from maybe the people, so I understand, though, I'm not quite sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on this guy's background, to tell you the truth. I will be really quite surprised if he does manage to topple them, because the history in Greece with the elites is probably one of the oldest in the world, really. It's ingrained in a big way. But after what happened with the bank accounts being raided and whatever else, they do use certain countries to beta test certain things. And a smaller country, like using Cyprus to steal everyone's money, you've got a very small, isolated country, quite easily done. You can control the population quite easily. And I can't help but feel that maybe Greece is in a similar situation where they've been screwed over so I mean, these people are suffering in a big way. They really are. And it's another example of what happens when you deal with Europe. Financially, it appears that they're finished. I'm going to have a look into him, and I would guarantee that somewhere along the line he has connections to some very shady folk. I think it's probably best that I do that before I give a real opinion, but like you, I really hope you're... Well, I think there'll be a good way of finding out if he really is genuine, and if he does start causing trouble and he starts making waves and he starts fixing things. He will be shot in the head very, very quickly.
Well, that's what he said. That's what I expected, unfortunately.
Tends to be how it is, doesn't it?
Oh, the Greeks, they found the backbone. We haven't found ours yet. The Greeks, when the smoking ban came in, they chucked it off in 2 months. And then they were going to bring in the tolls on road flow, and they'd be trying that here. And the Greeks just went and smashed over.
See, and this is the whole point.
Got a backbone, that's the difference.
When did we stop having a backbone? Because when you look back at when poll tax came in the 80s, the riots and whatever else, that doesn't happen anymore. People don't stand up for themselves anymore because they have been worked like dogs to the point where all they want to do is go home after work, sit down for 2 hours before they have to go to bed and get back up and go to work. They will take so much abuse now. We take so much abuse in this country because none of us have got the balls to get up and say anymore, screw this for a laugh.
There are some good politicians, though. You haven't got to be.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
There are good men out there.
Yes, there are good. Yeah, there are good men and women out there who get into this with good intentions, but when the system is run by the Bullingdon Boys Club and God knows what else, and Westminster is rife with paedophilia, and they won't deal with it, this is the problem we've got. It needs to be tackled from the top. There are good people much lower down in their communities who get into politics to try and help. Oh no. Yeah, but they're not the ones that are actually making the decisions and running the country, unfortunately.
Well, they make it damn uncomfortable when the prat puts some wrong stuff through.
Yeah, but you know, when there's thousands of children starving on a daily basis, it's not really much of an answer for them, is it? Yep.
I saw your excellent video on the McCanns, which was quite a while back.
Yeah.
Has there been any sort of developments that you can see that sort of any ideas in your head as to the reality of the McCanns and what's going on?
Do you know, that's really interesting actually, because not long after I made that video, literally a couple of weeks after I made that video, it ended up with the McCanns coming out, and I can't it was the Brenda Leyland stuff, that lady who had apparently committed suicide and what have you. Now, there was a very big deal going on in Portugal at the time, trade worth something like 800 billion or something ridiculous like that, and it's all very shifty, all very dodgy, and it was passed through, which means a lot of very bad things for a lot of people in England and over there. And the McCanns pulled the wool over everyone's eyes yet again. They are releasing, I believe now, a film where they will state that they believe Madeleine is dead. I don't know how 100% true that rumour is at the moment, but from what's being said, they are now going to come out and say, we believe our child is dead. Yeah, brilliant documentary. Yeah.
Well, then 2 dogs told the story, didn't they?
Yeah, 27 times they found DNA of that child. And those dogs,
They smelled blood and they smelled
well,
death.
and those dogs have never got it wrong in all of the years that they've been working, and they basically made the guy out to look like a charlatan. Right at the back.
Interestingly enough, when Madeleine McCann was missing, the stepfather and brother of Holly Gregg, the ones that were abusing her, that was when Madeleine McCann were missing at the time, them two fled to Portugal.
Oh, really?
I'm not saying there's any connection, but it is coincidence, isn't it?
Well, I think there's some very shady goings on in Portugal, to be honest.
Thanks, guys. What your last what? Last question.
You mentioned the schools
Yes.
get paid for the children when they're registered each one. Excuse my ignorance, but who actually pays the money to the school?
The local authority. Yeah, the local education authority.
Is that paid on a weekly or a monthly kind of basis? Is it an annual thing that they say, well, there were so many kids here this year, so give us X amount of money? Do you know detail how
It's done on a yearly basis. When at the end of the year you get your child's report and their attendance level, they then get paid. Sorry, they then get paid per child.
There's a lot of fees getting paid for fostering and adoption as well.
Are we good?
Thank you very much. Danielle.